When Jonathan died, I thought the worst pain in my life had already arrived. 17 years of marriage, gone in the silence of one night. He passed in his sleep, no warning, no chance for goodbyes. One minute we were sharing a book together on the sofa. The next I was dialing 911, with trembling hands, begging a dispatcher to send help for a man who was already gone. People say grief comes in waves. For me, it came as a storm, relentless, suffocating, endless. Every corner of my home reminded me of him. The worn coffee mug with his initials, his favorite tie still hanging in the closet, the smell of his aftershave clinging to the pillow beside me. But then came something even harder to bear. Because days after the funeral, when I was still stumbling through the fog of grief, I received an envelope Jonathan had arranged to be delivered to me after his death. It wasn't just a letter. Inside was a brass key, heavy, old-fashioned, and at the top of the page, in Jonathan's precise handwriting, were 4 words that froze me where I stood. Go to Ravenwood Estate. Ravenwood. The name was familiar, but only barely. Jonathan had mentioned it once or twice, always in a tone that shut down further questions. He had called it a place that isn't for you, Elena, and I had respected that boundary. In all our years of marriage, Jonathan never forbade me anything, except Ravenwood. And now here I was, holding the key to the one place I was never meant to go. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at that key until the sun went down. 100 questions spun through my head. Why now? Why Ravenwood? Why had my husband, the man I trusted with every piece of my soul, kept an entire estate hidden from me? Part of me wanted to tear the letter into pieces and forget it, pretend I never saw it. Pretend Jonathan was exactly who I thought he was. But grief does strange things to the heart. It makes you crave connection, even if that connection comes in the form of secrets left behind. The next morning, I drove 2 hours outside the city to find Ravenwood. And when I pulled into the long, winding drive, hemmed in by towering pines and fog that clung stubbornly to the ground, I realized something that made my stomach twist. Jonathan had been hiding more than just a house. The gates creaked open, revealing a mansion unlike anything I had ever imagined. Not abandoned, not falling apart, but alive, restored to perfection, standing tall like a monument he had built in silence. It was beautiful, it was haunting, and it was mine. But beauty, I would soon learn, always has a cost. Because inside Ravenwood, I found not just the last gift of a man who claimed to love me, I found videos Jonathan had recorded, one for every day of the year to come. His voice, speaking to me from beyond the grave, guiding me, warning me, preparing me. And I also found out that Jonathan wasn't the only one who knew the value of Ravenwood. His brothers knew too. And while Jonathan had left me love, they saw only money, and they were willing to destroy me to get it. This was the moment my grief ended, and my war began. The days after Jonathan's funeral were a blur of casseroles and condolences. Friends and colleagues filled my home with flowers, prayers, and whispered promises of call me if you need anything. But as the weeks passed, the visits slowed, the phone calls dwindled, and suddenly the house was quiet again. Too quiet. I tried to throw myself into work, my lectures at the university, the endless stack of papers that always needed grading. But even the words on the pages blurred, replaced with memories of Jonathan, his hand resting on mine while we read together, the way he always whistled while cooking breakfast, the little smile he wore when he thought I wasn't looking. Grief is strange. It sneaks up on you when you least expect it. I would be reaching for a jar in the pantry and find myself sobbing because Jonathan used to buy that brand of jam. I'd fold laundry and break down at the sight of his shirts, sleeves limp and empty. And yet, through all the pain, one thought kept circling my mind: Ravenwood. The key was still on my nightstand, gleaming whenever the morning sun hit it. That letter, with Jonathan's precise script, seemed to whisper to me every time I passed by. Go to Ravenwood Estate. I fought with myself for days. part of me argued that Jonathan must have had good reason to keep Ravenwood away from me. He wasn't a cruel man. He never lied for pleasure, so maybe this was something better left untouched. But the other part of me, the part hollowed out by loss, desperate for answers, desperate for him, couldn't let it go. So one Friday morning I got in the car, clutched that brass key in my palm, and drove. The countryside stretched endlessly, fields rolling by as I pressed deeper into the unknown. The GPS struggled, recalculating over and over, until finally the screen went blank. It was as if Ravenwood didn't want to be found. And then I saw it. Iron gates, tall and imposing, with vines climbing their black surface, like hands reaching from the earth. A stone arch above bore a single word, etched in Gothic script: Ravenwood. My stomach flipped. The gates creaked open when I pressed the key into the lock. The drive stretched on for what felt like miles, lined with ancient pines that blotted out the sun. And then there it was. Ravenwood Mansion. It stood at the end of the drive, regal and haunting. The brick was deep red, restored to perfection, windows gleaming as though someone had polished them that very morning. Balconies curved outward like open arms, yet the shadows cast by the roof made it seem as though the house were frowning down at me. It wasn't abandoned, it wasn't neglected, it was alive. My breath caught in my throat. Jonathan, what have you done? Inside, the mansion was even more astonishing. The entry hall stretched 2 stories high, with chandeliers that bathed the room in golden light. Portraits hung along the walls, not of strangers, but of landscapes, bookshelves, flowers Jonathan had known I loved. Every detail screamed intention. And then I found the first room that nearly brought me to my knees, a conservatory. Glass walls let in slants of sunlight, falling on row after row of orchids, white, pink, purple, rare hybrids I had only ever seen in botanical journals. My passion, my joy, my life's little obsession. Jonathan had built this for me. The next room was no less shocking. A studio, canvases lined against the walls, brushes laid neatly in jars, paint tubes organized by color. My abandoned dream. Before Jonathan, before marriage and motherhood, I had painted, but practicality, responsibility, and the demands of life had pushed that dream aside. Jonathan hadn't said forgotten. Tears blurred my eyes as I spun slowly in the center of the room. This house wasn't just a secret, it was a love letter. And yet, if it was a love letter, why hide it? Why keep it from me in life? The answer came that night. I found Jonathan's laptop on a desk in the study. When I opened it, the screen lit up immediately. No password, just a folder titled For Elena. Inside, videos, hundreds of them. With shaking hands, I clicked on the first. Jonathan's face filled the screen. Elena, he said, his voice steady, his eyes soft. If you sure watching this, it means I soon gone. I don't still want you to be alone in this first year without me, so I recorded something for every day, to walk with you, even if only in spirit. I covered my mouth as tears streamed down my face. His voice, his face, alive. He continued, Ravenwood is yours. Everything in it is for you, but you must be careful, Elena. There are things I couldn't tell you while I was alive, and there are people who will come for this place. For you. My heart stopped. His tone had changed. Serious, grave. Trust no one outside these walls, he said. Not even family. The video ended. My hand shook as I clicked on the next one. Same face, same voice, same warning, repeated in different ways. Not even family. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest tight, my heart pounding in my ears. What did Jonathan mean? Who did he mean? And why had he built this place in secrecy, if it was meant for me all along? I didn't know then. But I was about to find out. Because I wasn't the only one who knew about Ravenwood. And soon, they would come knocking. For the first week after discovering the videos, I lived in a strange limbo. Every morning, I would wake up, make coffee, and sit at Jonathan's desk to play the next recording. Each day, his face greeted me, his voice guiding me through grief, urging me to keep living. Sometimes he read me poems he knew I loved. Other times he gave me practical advice, how to care for the orchids, where the breaker switch was, even what wine paired best with the pasta I liked to cook. It was as if Jonathan had mapped out my days, refusing to let death silence him completely. And in those moments, Ravenwood felt like a sanctuary, a place where love still lived, even though he didn't. But alongside the comfort was something else. A weight, a shadow. Because threaded into his words, almost every day, were warnings. Don't trust anyone who asks too many questions about this place. Be cautious if strangers approach you. Family doesn't always mean safety. At first, I brushed it off as paranoia. Jonathan had always been a private man, wary of people's motives. Maybe this was just his way of trying to protect me when he knew he no longer could. But then, strange things began to happen. One afternoon, as I returned from the conservatory with fresh blooms in my arms, I noticed the front gate was open, wide open. I was sure, absolutely sure, I had locked it that morning. I froze, the orchids slipping from my grasp. My first thought was that someone was inside the house. My second thought was Jonathan's warning. I forced myself to check every room, clutching a heavy brass candlestick like a weapon. But the house was empty. No signs of intrusion, nothing missing. And yet the unease stayed with me. 2 nights later, the phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a voice I hadn't heard in years filled my ear. "Elena," the man said smoothly. It's Matthew. Jonathan Sepsa's oldest brother." I nearly dropped the phone. Jonathan hadn't spoken to his brothers in more than a decade. I'd only met them once, and the tension between them had been so sharp it could slice glass. "We heard about Jonathan," Matthew continued, his voice dripping with a false kind of sympathy. "Terrible loss. Just terrible. We were thinking we should come by, pay our respects." Respect. The word curdled in my stomach. "How did you get this number?" I asked sharply. He chuckled. "Oh, Elena, we have our ways. Besides, there are family matters to discuss. I sipped them. Sure, Jonathan left some things behind. Assets, properties. You still need guidance." I hung up without another word, my hands trembling. Family. Jonathan's warning echoed in my head. Not even family. That night, I opened another video. Jonathan stared straight into the camera, his expression somber. "If Matthew contacts you," he said, "don't believe a word. He'll try to sound helpful, but everything he does is for his own gain. And if Samuel or Victor show up with him, Elena, promise me you'll be careful. They'll stop at nothing." My blood ran cold. It was as if Jonathan knew, as if he were still watching. The next day, they came. I was pruning orchids in the conservatory when the sound of tires crunching gravel reached my ears. I peeked out the glass wall and saw them, 3 men climbing out of a black SUV, their suits too sharp, their smiles too thin. Matthew, Samuel, and Victor Brooks. The estranged brothers. I didn't move as they strode up the path. My heart thudded in my chest. They didn't bother to knock. The doorbell chimed once before Matthew let himself in, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. "Elena," he boomed, arms wide as though we were long-lost friends. "You look wonderful. And this house," he whistled, glancing around with greedy eyes. Jonathan certainly had taste. Samuel and Victor lingered behind him, exchanging glances that made my stomach twist. "What do you want?" I demanded. Matthew clutched his chest in mock offense. "We came to support you, to make sure you're not overwhelmed. Estates like this, well, they're difficult to manage, and with Jonathan gone, someone has to help you." "I don't need your help," I said flatly. His smile faltered, just slightly, then returned, sharper than before. "Well," he said, his voice low. You may not have a choice. You see, Ravenwood isn't just any property. It sits on land that developers have been chasing for years, prime real estate, and legally, Elena, family inheritance is a tricky thing. I think you'll find we have as much claim to this place as you do. My heart dropped. Jonathan hadn't just left me a house. He'd left me a target. That evening, after they finally left, after hours of circling conversation, veiled threats, and false sympathy, I went back to the videos. Jonathan's face appeared again, and his words confirmed my worst fears. They'll tell you Ravenwood isn't yours alone. They'll try to charm you, intimidate you, maybe even use Grace against you. But remember this, I built Ravenwood for you and only you. You must protect it, Elena, whatever it takes. Grace. I hadn't even considered the danger to her, my daughter, my only child. And the thought of Matthew, Samuel, and Victor whispering into her ear, spinning lies, poisoning her against me, chilled me to the bone. I closed the laptop, my chest heaving. Ravenwood was no longer just a sanctuary, it was a battlefield. And Jonathan had left me the first weapon, the truth. But truth alone wouldn't stop them. And I was about to discover that Jonathan had hidden more than orchids and art supplies in this mansion. He had hidden a secret room. And behind that door waited the kind of revelation that would change the war entirely. The next week was a blur of unease. The brothers had left Ravenwood, but their presence lingered like smoke after a fire. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind against the windows made me feel watched. Their words replayed in my head, about inheritance, about family matters, and worst of all, about Grace. My daughter was everything to me, my anchor, my reminder that life still had meaning, even without Jonathan. She was in her final year of college, balancing classes and a part-time job, but she called me every evening to check in. I lived for those calls. And then one night, she said the words I had been dreading. Mom, Uncle Matthew called me today. My chest tightened. He what? He said he just wanted to see how I was doing. He sounded nice, Mom. He said you might be overwhelmed managing the estate alone. He offered to meet me for coffee, just to talk. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. Just to talk. I knew Matthew's version of talk. Manipulation disguised as kindness. Poison wrapped in sugar. Grace, I said firmly, I don't want you meeting with them. Your uncles, they don't have our best interests at heart. Silence crackled on the line. Mom, she said slowly, I know you and Dad had issues with them, but maybe they've changed. Maybe you just being paranoid. The words cut deeper than she knew. Paranoid. Jonathan's warning suddenly loomed larger in my mind. Don't even trust family. But Grace was my family, my child. The idea that Matthew could already be sinking his claws into her made my stomach churn. Over the next days, the pressure grew. Grace confessed that she had met with Matthew after class. He had bought her coffee, listened to her worries, even shared stories about her father, half-truths twisted into daggers. He said Dad always meant for Ravenwood to be for all of you. She told me one evening, her voice hesitant, that Dad felt guilty about cutting them off. He said Dad would wanted the estate shared. I slammed my hand against the table. That's a lie, Grace. Your father told me himself. Ravenwood was for me, for us. But even as I said it, I could see doubt flickering in her eyes. She had loved her father, but she had also longed to know his side of the family, and now they were dangling acceptance in front of her, like a golden prize. Jonathan had warned me this would happen, and still, I wasn't ready for the ache of my daughter, looking at me like maybe I wasn't telling her the whole truth. The brothers began showing up uninvited. First it was Victor, dropping by with groceries he claimed were for the house. Then Samuel, offering to fix a leak I hadn't noticed, and always, Matthew the ringleader, smiling as though he owned the ground he walked on. Each visit was the same, compliments laced with suggestions. Suggestions laced with threats. You can run a place like this alone, Elena. Think of Grace's future. Wouldn't instead it be better with all of us working together? You wouldn't want legal trouble, would you? I wanted to scream, to throw them out and bolt the doors forever, but I knew that would only make them push harder. And then came the envelope, slipped under my door one evening, unmarked. Inside was a formal petition. The brothers were contesting Jonathan's will. They were dragging me into court. I sat at the dining table with the paper trembling in my hands, rage and despair colliding inside me. Jonathan had left me Ravenwood. He had recorded videos, built sanctuaries, prepared everything, and yet here I was, staring down the barrel of losing it all to men who cared only for money. That night, I turned again to Jonathan's 6 videos. His face filled the screen, weary but resolute. "Elena," he said softly, "if the time has come when my brothers are circling, they'll need more than warnings. They'll need proof, evidence. That's why I left you something else, something hidden." He leaned closer to the camera, lowering his voice as though someone could overhear him, even through the screen. "In the basement, behind the wine racks, there's a steel door. You'll need the small silver key I gave you on our 5th anniversary, the one you thought was for a jewelry box. It's not. Behind that door is everything you'll need to fight them, everything." My pulse quickened. I remembered that key. It was in a box on my dresser, long forgotten. Jonathan's eyes bored into mine through the screen. "Don't open it until you ready. What's inside will change everything." The video ended. That night, I crept down into the basement with the little silver key clutched in my fist. The air was cool, the concrete floor unforgiving beneath my bare feet. I pushed aside rows of dusty wine bottles until my hand brushed against cold metal. There it was, a steel door, hidden in the shadows. My breath hitched. Jonathan had planned this. He had built a fortress within a fortress. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy click. My hand hesitated on the handle. Jonathan's warning echoed in my head. "Don't open it until you're ready." But ready or not, the war had already begun. And whatever was waiting behind that door was the only chance I had left to win it. With trembling fingers, I pulled it open. And what I saw inside made my knees go weak. The door swung open with a groan, and the scent of steel and dust drifted out to meet me. I flicked on the light, and my breath caught in my throat. This wasn't just a hidden storage room, it was a bunker. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, shelves stacked with binders, rows of labeled boxes. On one side stood a desk with a computer, its screen glowing faintly, humming quietly, as if Jonathan had only just stepped away. And on the far wall, pinned across corkboards in meticulous order, were photographs, newspaper clippings, contracts, receipts, all connected by Jonathan's careful handwriting. It looked like something out of a detective movie, but this wasn't fiction. This was Jonathan's war room. My knees nearly gave out as I stepped inside. Jonathan hadn't just built Ravenwood as a gift, he had built it as a fortress. And these walls were his armory. The first binder I opened was labeled Matthew. Inside, neatly organized, were records of shady business deals, tax fraud, forged documents, pages and pages of evidence that could ruin him in court. Another binder, Samuel, offshore accounts, bribes, blackmail letters. Then Victor, even worse, a paper trail that screamed corruption, illegal partnerships, and debts he could never repay. Jonathan had collected everything. For years he had been gathering proof of his brother's crimes. He knew them. He knew what they were capable of. And he knew they would come for Ravenwood. As I flipped through the pages, my grief twisted into something new. Rage. They thought they could scare me, corner me, turn Grace against me, but Jonathan had left me the weapon to end them. All I had to do was use it. Still, one thought gnawed at me, Grace. She had been quieter lately, answering my calls with short replies, avoiding visits. When she finally came by that weekend, I saw the truth in her eyes before she spoke a word. "Mom," she said, arms crossed. "Uncle Matthew explained everything. He said you were clinging to this estate out of grief, that Dad would instead have wanted you to suffer here alone. He said, maybe it's Sep's time you let go." I felt my chest tighten. There it was, the betrayal I had feared. "Grace," I said softly, "listen to me. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. All they want is this house, this land, the money that sets it." She shook her head. "You don't know that." "I do," I snapped. Then softer, "because your father knew, he left me proof." Her eyes flickered with doubt, but she looked away. "You're just saying that." "No," I said firmly. "Come with me." I led her down into the basement. My hands shook as I opened the war room door, praying I wasn't making a mistake. "Look," I said, gesturing to the binders, the files, the wall covered in evidence. "Your father spent years building this. He knew what his brothers were. He knew they would come for Ravenwood, and he left this for us, to protect us." Grace's eyes darted across the room. At first, suspicion, then shock, then anger. She picked up a binder, flipped through the pages, her hands trembling. This is real," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "This is who they are. This is why your father cut them out, and this is why we can let them win." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then Grace closed the binder and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I didn't believe you," she said, her voice breaking. I thought you were just scared." "I was scared," I admitted, "but not of losing Ravenwood, of losing you." Grace threw her arms around me, and I held her as tightly as I could. The brothers had nearly taken her from me, but not anymore. Together, we would fight. The next weeks were spent in preparation. Every evening, Grace and I pored over the files in the war room. We scanned documents, copied records, assembled a timeline of their corruption. Jonathan Sepp's videos guided us step by step. One clip even showed him holding up a binder. "If you are watching this, Elena, it means the brothers are circling. Everything you need to bring them down is right here. Don't be afraid to use it. Don't let them bully you." His voice became our battle cry. Then came the day the court summons arrived. The brothers were challenging the will formally, demanding Ravenwood be divided. They claimed Jonathan had been influenced by me, that his mind had been unsound when he left everything to his wife. The gall of it made me sick. Jonathan had been meticulous to the end, sharper than ever, but I knew their game smear me, sow doubt, twist grief into weakness. Too bad for them, I wasn't weak anymore. The night before the hearing, I sat alone in the war room, staring at Jonathan's final video. His face looked thinner, his voice weaker, but his eyes burned with the same fire I now felt in my own chest. "Elena," he whispered, "if you're watching this, it means the fight has come, but you're not alone. You have everything you need, and you have Grace. Trust her, trust yourself. And remember, Ravenwood isn't just walls and land, it's you, it's the life we built together. Don't let them take it." Tears blurred my vision, but this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of resolve. The next morning, I put on my best black suit, clasped Jonathan's watch around my wrist, and walked into that courthouse with Grace at my side. I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a warrior. And it was time to strike back. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper. The air buzzed with whispers, shoes squeaking against marble, the shuffle of files in lawyers' hands. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Grace at my side, my palms pressed flat to steady the tremor in them. Across the aisle, the brothers sat in a row like vultures dressed in expensive suits. Matthew smirked when his eyes met mine. Samuel leaned back, bored, as if the outcome were already decided. Victor drummed his fingers on the table, restless, hungry. The judge entered, and silence fell. Court is now in session. The brother's lawyer wasted no time. He painted me as fragile, overwhelmed, unfit to handle an estate like Ravenwood. He spoke of Jonathan's declining health, suggesting I had manipulated him, poisoned his mind to ensure everything was left to me. He even dared to say that Grace had been pressured by me to reject her uncle's help. Every word made my blood boil. But I stayed still, steady, because I knew what was coming. When it was our turn, my attorney rose. "Your Honor," she said, "this case is not about grief or family disputes. It is about truth. And the truth is, Jonathan Brooks knew exactly what he was doing when he left Ravenwood to his wife. Because he knew his brothers, he knew what they were capable of, and he documented it thoroughly." At her signal, Grace and I wheeled in a cart stacked with binders and boxes. The brothers stiffened, their smirks fading. One by one, we laid out the evidence Jonathan had collected: bank statements showing fraud, wire transfers to offshore accounts, signed contracts linking them to illegal deals, photos of meetings they had denied ever attending, even voice recordings Jonathan had obtained: Samuel bribing a city official, Victor threatening a contractor. The courtroom buzzed as each piece was displayed. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised. Matthew's face turned red. Samuel stopped leaning back. Victor's restless tapping froze midair. "This is not the work of a confused man," my attorney said firmly, holding up a binder. "This is the work of a man who knew his time was short and who wanted to protect his wife and daughter from predators who happened to share his last name." I glanced at Grace. Her chin was lifted high, her eyes burning with the same fire as her father's. Together, we were untouchable. The brothers tried to fight back. Of course, their lawyer objected, scrambled, accused us of forgery, but every claim crumbled against Jonathan's meticulous records. And then came the final blow. My attorney submitted Jonathan's video testimony, one he had recorded specifically for this possibility. The screen lit up, and Jonathan's face appeared, pale but resolute. "If my brothers are in this courtroom," he said, his voice echoing through the silent chamber, "know this: I see you. I have always seen you. Every lie, every theft, every scheme. I documented it all. Ravenwood belongs to Elena, because she is the only one I trusted. And if you try to take it from her, you will be exposing yourselves, not her." The silence that followed was heavy, electric. The judge cleared his throat. "I have heard enough." He looked directly at the brothers. "Your petition is not only denied, but I am forwarding this evidence to the district attorney Sepp's office for further investigation. You are dismissed from this court." The gavel struck. Bang. It was over. Outside, the sun blazed bright against the courthouse steps. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, voices shouting for statements. The brothers pushed through the crowd like defeated generals retreating from battle, their faces twisted in rage. Matthew glanced back at me once, his eyes burning with hate, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in months, I felt tall, solid, free. Grace squeezed my hand. "We did it, Mom." "No," I said softly, my eyes on the horizon. "Your father did. We just finished what he started." That night, back at Ravenwood, I unlocked the war room one last time. The files, the clippings, the evidence, all of it was Jonathan's legacy of protection. But it was also a burden I no longer needed to carry. The law had it now. The fight was won. I closed the door gently, almost reverently. For the first time, the house felt like it was mine. Not a battlefield, not a fortress, but a home. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild. I spent mornings in the conservatory, tending to orchids that seemed to bloom brighter than ever. Afternoons in the studio, brushing color across canvas the way I hadn't in years. Grace came often, laughing, helping, filling the halls with the sound of life again. And every evening, I watched one of Jonathan's videos. His face, his voice, still guiding me, still reminding me to live. But as the days passed, I noticed something. The sadness I once felt when the videos ended was slowly fading. In its place was something new: strength, peace, a knowledge that while Jonathan had left me a gift, I had also built something myself: resilience. Months later, I stood on the balcony at Ravenwood, the sunset casting gold across the sky. The necklace Jonathan had given me years ago rested at my throat, warm against my skin. Grace stepped out beside me, her smile soft. "Dad would be proud of you." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "No," I whispered, "he said be proud of us." We stood in silence, watching the sun sink. Ravenwood was no longer a secret, no longer a curse. It was a legacy, a symbol of love that endured through betrayal, through battle, through everything. And as the first stars blinked awake in the twilight, I realized something with perfect clarity. The brothers thought they could strip me of my dignity, my freedom, my home. But in trying to destroy me, they had made me stronger. And that strength was the sweetest revenge of all.